I'm sure most of you guys know what the CES letter is, but in case you don't, let me tell you. It's basically a collection of unanswerable questions about Mormonism assembled by Jeremy Runnels and others. Questions that completely debunk the claims of Mormonism. Well, I've decided to write something of a Jehovah's Witness version of the CES letter. It's my letter to the governing body. So here are a few questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, and here's a challenge to them. If you can answer these questions to my satisfaction, then I will renounce my apostasy and rejoin the religion. Let's get into it. Before we get into it, I want to mention something. If you guys like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring or on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff, so give it a look. All links are in the description. Okay, now let's read the letter to the governing body. Question 1. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses ban celebrating Christmas, Easter, birthdays, toasting, pinjatas, and wind chimes because of their pagan roots? But wedding rings are perfectly acceptable despite their admittedly pagan roots. The February 15th, 2007 Watchtower, page 30, says, "Moreover, the wedding ring at one time had religious significance, yet most people today don't know that, considering a wedding ring a mere evidence that someone is married." I agree. Most people view the wedding ring as evidence that you're married, and nothing more. But the same can be said about wind chimes, birthdays, toasting, and pinjatas. What's different about wedding rings? If we're all in, then we're all in, right? Question 2. Why is it that the governing body identified the United Nations as the scarlet-colored beast with 7 heads and 10 horns from the Book of Revelation, but you felt it was acceptable to register as an NGO, a member of the United Nations, from February 1992 to October 2001? The governing body clearly identified the UN as the scarlet-colored beast with 7 heads and 10 horns on their website. Here are some of the criteria they used. According to them, it must be a political entity. It has a likeness of the worldwide political system. It derives power from other rulerships. It's linked with religion. It dishonors God, and it was temporarily inactive. Many other Christians don't make claims about the scarlet-colored beast. Some claim it's the European Union. But the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses claim to have special knowledge that it's the United Nations. Putting aside the fact that you're claiming to have special insight provided by God that nobody else has, and thus no one else can question, if you truly believed it was the scarlet-colored beast from Revelation, why did you sign up to be a member and remain a member for 9 years? Why did you revoke your status as a member of the UN only after you were found out by the Guardian? Why did you wait until then to offer up an explanation for your UN membership? And regarding the explanation you offered, so you'd have access to the UN library, why did you feel that membership in the organization you identified as the scarlet-colored beast from the Book of Revelation was worth it, when the same exact books from the UN library could be accessed in nearby depositories that didn't require UN membership? Question 3. God has never demanded human sacrifice as part of worship. Why does the governing body demand human sacrifice through rejection of a blood transfusion? One of the Bible verses the governing body uses to justify rejection of blood transfusions is Leviticus 17:14. It says, quote, "You must not eat the blood of any sort of flesh, because the soul of every sort of flesh is in its blood. Anyone eating it will be cut off." I have 2 main issues with their position. First, the verse specifically says eat. The word used in that verse, eat, is a Hebrew word that literally means to consume through your mouth and into your stomach, to devour. That's not the same as getting a life-saving medical treatment. They had medical treatments that dealt with blood at the time. They weren't necessarily effective, like bloodletting, but they had them. But the Old Testament laws never mentioned medical treatments when talking about banned blood use. Now, all that being said, I wouldn't put it past the Old Testament to ban blood transfusions if they had existed. I mean, they banned people from eating pork. It's not outside the realm of possibility. They just didn't. And that brings me to my second objection to Jehovah's Witnesses' ban on blood transfusions. Notice I didn't call it the biblical ban on transfusions. That's because, as far as I'm concerned, it's not biblical. My second objection is that it was grouped in with a bunch of Old Testament laws. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament law, which means that Christians aren't banned from wearing polyester, eating pork or shrimp, putting 2 literal seeds seeds in the same literal hole, from working on the Sabbath, and no, they're certainly not banned from eating blood. Certainly not banned from using it for a life-saving medical procedure. Granted, eating blood is discussed in the New Testament too, and there are cultural and health reasons why we don't literally eat it today. But Jewish people have a very specific method of slaughtering their food to make sure all the blood is properly drained. It's part of making sure the food is kosher. If Jehovah's Witnesses don't bother with eating kosher, which they don't, then they certainly shouldn't sacrifice their lives to the governing body by refusing a life-saving medical treatment. And if all of that doesn't grab you, how about this one? Why did Jesus teach that it's okay to break God's law to save an animal's life on the Sabbath? Proving that God wants you to follow the spirit of the law, not the letter of it. But Jehovah's Witnesses contradict Jesus' teaching by saying that upholding the Old Testament law is more important than human life. You aren't sacrificing your life to God by not getting a blood transfusion. You're sacrificing your life to man, to the governing body. Question 4. Jehovah's Witnesses use Bible math to claim that Jesus came to Earth invisibly in 1914. How can you accept the math, knowing that it was calculated out to be 1843 by the Millerite movement, and when nothing happened then, they claimed Jesus came back invisibly too? This is a callback to the Watchtower Society's many failed end times predictions, which include but are not limited to 1878, 1881, 1913, 1914, 1918, 1925, and 1975. Most of these were calculated with cryptic Bible math. Why do you keep reinforcing the date 1914, even though we have incontrovertible evidence that the Bible math has been used throughout history to incorrectly calculate doomsday dates? Scholars throughout the world acknowledge that a key date in the 1914 doctrine, the fall of Jerusalem, happened in 586 BCE, not 607 BCE. The date must be 607 for the Bible math to be correct, and we have objective evidence that it happened 20 years later in 587. That means that your claim that Jesus came back in 1914 is just wrong. When presented with contradictory facts, why do you refuse to accept it, instead of accepting that the founder of the religion might have gotten his information mixed up 150 years ago? Charles Taze Russell's lack of information isn't a reflection on you as a governing body. The claims were made a long time ago. We didn't have the archaeological discoveries we have today. Refusing to acknowledge archaeological discoveries to cling to an antiquated Bible teaching makes you look less trustworthy, not more trustworthy. Question 5. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses consider their old literature apostate material and threaten shunning for people who possess it? How can you justify that? In 1947, Jehovah's Witnesses wrote an article entitled, "Are You Also Excommunicated?" In the article, they claim that excommunication is originally a pagan practice. They sympathize with people who've experienced it. Only a couple decades later, they have fully incorporated it into their religion. Not only will you be shunned for quote-unquote sinning, you'll also be shunned for deciding that you don't believe it anymore. At this point, how can you justify cutting people off from their friends and family members just because they don't agree with your teachings? From the outside looking in, it looks like it's just a tactic to trap people in so they have no choice but to remain a part of the religion. Question 6. Why aren't beards allowed? Several Bible characters had beards, and even the founder, Charles Taze Russell, had a beard. Isn't it strange that the founder of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society had a beard, but it's unacceptable for Jehovah's Witnesses to have one? When I was a Jehovah's Witness, we'd have 3 conventions per year. One was a special day assembly. It was on Sunday. About 10 congregations in one little area would gather at a convention center and sit through about 8 hours of sermons. That's when people would get baptized. Then we had the circuit assembly. This was a slightly larger group. Everybody in our circuit would come. Same formula. We'd have about 8 hours of sermons per day, and on one of the 2 days, we'd have baptisms. On the other day, we'd usually have what they call a drama. They would get some Jehovah's Witnesses on stage to act out an instructive Bible story. They'd dress up as the Bible characters and everything. They don't really do that anymore as far as I know, but lots of Bible characters from the stories they told had beards. How'd the governing body work with that? Their members inexplicably aren't allowed to have beards, but the respectable and universally loved Bible characters they were imitating, like Jesus or Abraham or Moses or whoever, did. The governing body offered up this advice regarding the dramas in the 2002 Kingdom Proclaimers booklet with the drama's script and guidelines. Quote, Characters should be dressed according to local custom and the circumstances of the scene. Examples may be found in the publications of Jehovah's Witnesses. Good taste should always be the guiding principle. Extensive and elaborate makeup is not necessary. Usually it cannot be seen by the audience, and it consumes time that could be better spent attending the sessions at the convention. False beards should be prepared or obtained. It is not proper for brothers to grow their own beards. Unquote. What? It's not proper for people to grow beards to imitate a respectable Bible character who did have a beard? Why? What's the reasoning here? Somebody wrote a letter to the governing body to see if they could get an answer. They said beards are often worn in the professional world, so they were hoping for a solid reason. The governing body responded with a watered-down answer that basically amounts to the following. Having a beard doesn't mean you won't survive Armageddon. You can still get baptized, you can still knock on doors, you can still give talks at the meetings. But if a man wants to be involved in any other capacity of the religion, then he should be aware that it'll be the subject of disturbance and controversy in the congregation. If you want to take a leadership role in the congregation, like an elder or even a ministerial servant, then you can't have a beard. So where did this come from? When did the beard ban start? The founder, Charles Taze Russell, died on Halloween night in 1916. After that, Joseph Rutherford became heavily involved in the leadership. Here's a quote from jwfacts.com. The tide against beards had already started with Rutherford, Watchtower's second leader. Rutherford's clean-shaven appearance and imposition upon other brothers was a way to distance the religion from Russell's leadership. Many didn't accept Rutherford as Watchtower's rightful second leader, and Rutherford took insult with brothers sporting beards in imitation of Russell. This is explained in the book 30 Years a Watchtower Slave, recounting an experience from 1925. Here's a quote from the book. An amusing incident took place at the time of the judge's visit, the judge being Rutherford. The director of our German branch, as had many before him, had grown a large beard, patterned after Charles T. Russell's beard. The judge did not want anything at all to remain which might remind him of Russell, not even the cultivation of a beard. So sitting at the table for dinner one night within my earshot, the director asked the judge for one more large rotary press. The judge said nothing for a while, merely ate. So suddenly he looked up, his eyes pinned severely on the director's huge beard, and said, "I will buy you that press if you take that thing off," pointing to the beard. It surely shocked the director's sensibilities, but he meekly heeded the warning and soon shamefacedly appeared minus the beard. That quote is from the book 30 Years a Watchtower Slave. Schnell, page 51 and 52. It was corroborated in the Jehovah's Witnesses 1974 yearbook. That's where the beard ban started. So I level this question to you, governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. Why so petty? Why can't you let go of old conflicts or claims made 100 or more years ago, when we can clearly see the facts for what they are? That's the letter so far. There's a lot more to come, but I figured I'd start there. I put some links to further reading in the description if you're curious where I got my information. I got some of the questions from the r/xjw subreddit. I asked the people there for help coming up with the questions that Jehovah's Witnesses can't answer, and they delivered. As I list more questions, I'll add more contributors' names to the list. But for the moment, just check out the Reddit post. I put a link in the description. I also put links to a website called jwfacts.com, which has been eternally useful in my effort to write this letter. So if you want to know where I got my information or you want to read more about it, start there. I also want to point out that I do make mistakes. I am not perfect. If I don't acknowledge my mistakes, then I'm no better than the governing body members themselves. I am 100% sure there are mistakes somewhere in my library of hundreds of videos. When I discover an error, I pin the correction comment to the top of the video so others are aware of it. If it's an egregious error, then I've been known to pull the video down completely and re-upload a corrected, re-recorded script. It happens, but I put a lot of effort into making sure I get things correct. So if you ever find a legitimate error, leave a comment on the video and I'll pin it to the top. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff. Mostly it's 3D printed retro game stands. But I also sell these 2020 dumpster fire candle holders, or just regular dumpster fire candle holders. And I sell these signs. If you want to keep Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons from knocking on your door, put these signs out front. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't afraid of anything except for apostates. And you don't have to be an ex-Jehovah's Witness to be an apostate. The term applies to anybody critical of the religion. So if you want to keep them away, then consider getting one of these. All links can be found in the description and the pinned comment, as always. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.